Yeah, really? I really didn't think that students would be having so much trouble with their examinations. That's really unexpected. So, yeah, we'll definitely have to talk to the lecturers about that and make sure that they're sort of up to speed. Wait, what do you mean? Right now? Oh, okay. I didn't realize. You want me to make a video now and post? Oh, okay. Okay, no worries. Let's have a look. Oh, sorry. I didn't realize we were live. Are you guys there? Well, I guess I may just as well run through this with you now since I have you guys live. Anyway, stay tuned. Lots and lots of good content coming up. Don't go anywhere. Hi there. You've most likely run into three very important processes within memory: encoding, storage, and retrieval. Now, all three of these are really important when it comes to our ability to store information, especially for things like tests and exams or any other assessment. There's a few key things that I really want you to take home from this video to try and help you improve your study technique in particular. So let's run our way through. If you have any questions, feel free, leave a comment. I'll try and respond to them as soon as I can. So running through 4 key factors that influence each of these. So there's environment, physiology, mind, and motivation. These are critical elements that all influence these processes. Now take note for the mind, there's the subconscious and there is the conscience. We will do more on these in a later date. They are really critical, they all influence different factors. Now physiology is everything to do with the body. Take note, nutrients are really important when it comes to study, getting your body into peak optimal condition. Also note, encoding basically corresponds to you studying information. Storage basically corresponds to the memory that you form. And retrieval is the relevance of the information. Now, each of these factors are able to influence the different stages of being able to form memories. So regardless of whether it's encoding, storage, or retrieval, each of those are being influenced. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of the modalities, maybe the VARK modalities as an example. And yes, science has more or less debunked their importance, but that doesn't mean we completely ignore them, right? We can sort of appreciate that they may well still influence our ability to learn information. So just to remind you, that is read-write, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and obviously the multimodal combination. Now, I'll pause this clip for a brief second and just draw your attention. So, yes, maybe these elements by themselves don't always influence our ability to learn, but I would make a prediction that if those elements are deemed important by most students, then chances are they will have an influence. So the question then is, if this was a hypothesis, how would we test this? And why would you want to test this when you're busy studying? Does it even make sense to try and do such a thing? I'm going to argue yes, and for a very good reason. The world is always perceived in different ways. There are different elements, and we do show preferences towards those. If, by chance, they're not absolutely connected to improved performance, perhaps, that doesn't mean that we can completely disregard them. You can still make use of these techniques, even if they don't necessarily provide a benefit. If you show preference, therefore, maybe to written information, that is good. That is a strength you want to retain. Doesn't mean you should ignore the others. If anything, I would encourage you to be multimodal at all points in time, because that does mean you're incorporating more senses, and therefore you will be able to enhance your connections within your synapses. So just to recap on the center of the figure, we've got a little bit of extra detail here. So generally with encoding, we'll be exposed to new information, whether it's by choice or just through environment. And when that information is being encoded within the neurons, in particular the synapses or the individual connections between neurons, more on that in a future video, there are 2 forms of memory. We have short-term and long-term. Each of those have different purposes, and really it's the feedback that we provide the brain that determines where information is stored. So if we apply more modalities, we're introducing more strength to those synapses. And as a result, the brain, and therefore your synapses and memories will find reason to reinforce the information. And as a result, you're going to end up with stronger memories. Stronger memories turn into long-term memories, and therefore you remember the information when you do your test questions, which is great. The only way to get good marks, right? So the only real catch with all of this, it's great when you've been able to manage to learn all of the information that you've been provided in your curriculum or maybe in your university degrees. But the number one issue that I found, and this is even within my own studies, was retrieval, right? You're given a few questions in your test paper, and from those few questions, you're meant to recall everything on one specific topic. Now, it sounds straightforward, right? Everything will just be in your mind. It'll all come forth when you need it. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. But maybe it can be, right? That's what study technique is all about. What's the point in having study technique if there isn't technique behind it? So we'll explore that in a bit more detail. But for now, let's get this clip back up and running. So really, really important to appreciate the actual methods that we can employ. And there are three that I want to draw your attention to. Within those, there are many sub-methods or techniques. So the first one, study method. One example there, retrieval practice. Again, we'll go through these in more detail in future content. There's study techniques. You've heard of hundreds of these, maybe not quite hundreds, but heaps. Good example there, the Feynman technique. You can teach it to a youngster, for example, then you know the information well because you can break it down. So another good example there for memory technique, the mind map, which is my personal favorite. It's incredible, the information you can lock away with a mind map. Another really good study technique, the Pomodoro technique, right? 20 to 25 minutes is sort of optimal, being able to enhance your memory using that technique. Some of the other memory techniques, we had flashcards and diagrams. Again, you've probably heard of these before. Another really cool pair of study methods, SQ3R, spaced practice, and one last one there for study technique, the Leitner system. Now, I know what you're thinking. You've seen these before. You sort of understand their purpose, but maybe you don't. Maybe, just maybe, this hasn't been fully explained, or at least the connections haven't been drawn as clearly as they can be. So I've put labels on these. The labels probably could be interchanged with other phrases as well, but for our purposes, this makes for a really good descriptive way of breaking down what each of these methods are meant to achieve. So study technique, you're thinking, what does study technique achieve? Why would I label it study technique? Well, the key thing with study technique is it's really a way in which we can encode information. So it has a heavy influence on how information is encoded, right? Thinking about the Pomodoro technique, what is it? Well, you're channeling your focus. You're using a timer. You're setting a limit, saying, okay, within the next 25 minutes, I have one goal. That one goal is to learn all the biology for genetics that I have in a test maybe on Thursday coming up in 2 days. So poor time management, do that in a future video. But really important with the Pomodoro technique, it helps you to focus, and then you incentivize your ability to focus with a reward, right? Being able to take a break, maybe checking your Instagram or any other social media you might be running. And really important there because it provides feedback. You then get a break, you get your ability to refresh, and then you launch back into it. Now, Feynman technique, again, really, really popular technique. Super, super important to really appreciate what this technique is designed for. So really useful when it comes to making sure that you truly understand information. From that perspective, it's really about retrieval. But not just retrieval, it's also a very semantic-based process because you're having to truly understand the information. You can't just sort of read it and reproduce it. You must actually understand it. So Feynman technique, really cool technique. We will absolutely explore these in future content. Next one there, the Leitner system. So I'm sure you've probably heard of the Leitner system. This one is incredible, huge link there to flashcards. Leitner system is really powerful, and sort of the simplest way to put it is that you're not just practicing your encoding, but you're actively testing your memory and therefore retrieval. As you're doing that, you're also testing your storage. So it's almost a very dynamic technique because you're incorporating each of these elements. So again, we'll explore this in much more detail later, but Leitner system, you'd have, say, 5 levels. And level 1 would be sort of your entry level. You take your flashcard as an example. You've got your question on one side and your answer on the other. You can arrange all of them in level 1, and you test yourself on day 1. And then maybe you manage to pass, you get all those questions correct on the first day, so fantastic, 100% success. You then place them into the second slot, so level 2. The next day you launch in and repeat this process. You test your memory, your recall, and maybe you discover half of them you did really well, the other half perhaps you forgot. So you can take them back a level. Those that you managed to do on the second day, you can move forward a level. So you keep following this process until all of the flashcards, as an example, end up in your highest level, in which case you've more or less mastered it. So it combines a few things. You've got active recall, very powerful technique or method, and you also have very powerful application of your ability to retrieve the information. Active recall, you're sort of spacing the learning as well, so a bit of space repetition there, and really combating the natural forgetting curve in that entire process. So really, really powerful technique. We will go back into that one in much more depth. So next one there, the study methods in particular. So study method, again, is really, really powerful. The 3 methods here are the ones that are the most backed sort of with evidence at a scientific level to really, really make an impact on your grades. So spaced practice, sort of heavily tying in with the Leitner technique as well. But the spaced practice pretty much just forces your mind to reinforce the idea that what you're about to learn is due or destined for long-term memory. So again, sounds kind of confusing, but really, really important when you're learning information. If you do not do spaced repetition, so repeating it over a period of time, you determine that period based off when your test is. So if it's a week away, you got to space it accordingly. So probably every day. If it was 2 weeks away, you could do the first day, then the second day, then skip maybe 1 day, and then skip 2 days, something like that. So there are strategies there for how to appropriately space your repetition. The key thing with spaced practice, it's all about retrieval and a little bit more encoding, so reinforcing the information. So SQ3R, I think, is really, really cool, very powerful note-taking technique, but you'll appreciate for this one, it's more focused on the encoding level, right? You're focused on how you incorporate the information into your memories. And that becomes really important as you particularly climb higher in your curriculums. So maybe if you get into high school or university level, how you make notes actually becomes really important, and it's not very well taught. So definitely something you sort of walk in the dark on, unless you can find someone who can help you through. But metacognition, for example, you learn about these techniques and then you begin to improve your information processes and memory encoding. So again, we will try and cover as many of these in future content just to make sure you're up to speed on each of them. And the next one there, retrieval practice. So as it sort of implies, heavy link to retrieval. You're literally testing yourself, like active recall, making sure you're able to remember key bits of information. Okay, jumping to the memory technique. We're almost done with this one. So mind map. Absolutely love mind maps. I feel like they're almost cheating so bear with me if you believe in the modalities, right? Maybe you're a visual learner. Personally, absolutely. I can confirm I'm a visual learner, so much so that if I had learned a mind map before my exam and applied spaced repetition, I would, in the very first instance of starting that exam, be able to recall the fundamental structure of my mind map. I can reproduce it maybe on the planning page, if there is such a page, or otherwise just anywhere on the test paper. And all I needed was just the subheadings. So you have your core heading, maybe it's genetics, and then around that you have your subheadings, maybe it's things to do with the DNA structure, maybe you're doing a little bit on the different elements of variance, maybe a little bit on the different proteins and enzymes involved in DNA replication, things like that. So you have all your subheadings, and just by being able to unlock that information, I can take the essay question, whichever one is relevant, and basically recall the other subheadings. So just by having that structure from the mind map, I was able to recall massive amounts of information fairly accurately. And again, I think what made it really useful for me was being able to master this, particularly towards my postgraduate studies. I didn't really have it fully sort of developed early on when I was, say, at undergrad. But by the time I got to postgrad, I had this completely sort of mapped out, and almost a shame getting to the end of postgrad and then you stop maybe learning, or at least you don't challenge yourself with examinations as much. Really cool technique. Absolutely love mind maps. Very, very powerful, assuming that you believe in the whole modality component, which I absolutely think has an influence, even if not scientifically verified at this point. We'll work on it. Next one, diagrams. So I think diagrams is quite cool as well. You are well familiar with the saying, a picture tells 1,000 words. I think that's absolutely true. You will run into this quite a lot. And I think, again, if you are able to understand diagrams well, and if you are able to visualize those components, it could be really powerful and quite useful for your studies. So definitely focus on diagrams. If you can find a diagram, supplement it with the reading and writing component, and you'll find that you'll just be able to reinforce memories more. It's all about connections. Synapses form based off strength, thresholds. So if the threshold doesn't quite meet, there's not enough links, the brain will sort of degrade the memory. It doesn't want to retain information that it doesn't deem critical. So really important. And the last one there, flashcards. So sort of heavily tied into the Leitner system. We've done a fair bit on that one. So I think we'll absolutely revisit each of these components. So I do want to say, hopefully you found that useful. I will absolutely try and make content on each of these. If you have specific requests, send them through. The goal here would be to try and reinforce your studies, to try and get you up to speed so that you can walk into a test confident, you can recall all of the information that is required, you can analyze your test questions without any problems, and hopefully see you in the next video. Now, what shall we do next? So many choices. Yeah, it's a real tough choice. Should we do the modalities? Do you guys want to see modalities? Nah, that's right. Other people have done that one. We'll do something more interesting. Take it easy.